Welcome, folks. We are live. Welcome to today's edition of the Facebook Live interview. I am Jen Bunk, CEO of the People Stack and career coach for tech managers. That over there is Jocelyn Miller. She is founder and CEO of JM Coaching and Consulting and a personal accelerator for companies and teams. It's so great to talk with you again, Jocelyn.
Yes, it's great to talk with you as well, Jen.
Yeah, and apologies for the delay. We had let's just say some technical difficulties with Be Live. Chrome decided they didn't want to give it. Chrome decided that Be Live was not allowed, and it had to go underneath the hood to tell Chrome, no, it's okay. It's not a security concern.
Totally.
And then Jocelyn was having some challenges with the audio piece of it. So now we can hear each other, we can see each other. Hopefully you can hear us and you can see us.
Yes.
So we're going to hop right in and talk for the next 40 minutes or so about leadership best practices at Amazon and Google. And before we dive into that though, Jocelyn, how about you give us kind of like a lightning round of where you were and how it was that you came to learn some of these leadership best practices at Amazon and Google?
Absolutely. In a nutshell, I always talk about what I studied as people and machines because I studied cognitive science and computer science. And that led me to head to Seattle to Amazon very early on. And I started there as a software developer, software engineer, but then quickly it was pretty obvious to everyone that I'm much more of a product manager. Not that, or at least to me anyway. I mean, I would always get told like, oh, you write code so well. I'm like, this is awful. Like I am so much better at, asking the questions of why are we building this product? What are we building? Who is it for? All of this. So I utilized all my technical expertise to build like really technical, but also really functional, really useful, really impactful products. And so I switched into product management there. And then I wanted to kind of double check when I got to Google. I was like, well, let me be an engineer again. So I did that for a bit. I'm like, oh, nope, still think the same thing. And, it's like I'd much rather coordinate a team of engineers than be one myself. So I then moved back into product management and did similar stuff. Like at both Google and Amazon, I worked heavily on personalization, on search. I did a stint in Google Health, like double click and display ads, all kinds of different areas. At one point, we bought a fashion company and worked on that. But overall, really just all my focus was really building amazing products, utilizing all the amazing capabilities of technology. And so the way I approach technology is very much technology is meant to help make people's lives better. So that's the approach that I take. And then from there, I was director of product at Zazzle. And over the last 6 years, I've been taking all these best practices and teaching Fortune 500 companies how to like better build product and manage teams, and also up-leveling individuals so that they could become leaders and like high impact technical and product folks in this technology-driven world that we live in.
Excellent. I love it. I really, really love your story. So thank you for giving us that lightning round version of it. I know that there's a lot more to that. And I did, for those of you who might want to hear a little bit more about Jocelyn's story, I did have her on the podcast, on the People Stack podcast, where we got a lot more into that piece of it. We won't have the time. That's not kind of the focus of today. We're going to be talking about leadership best practices. But I wanted to just give people kind of an understanding of where these came from and where you were, and the wonderful background that you have.
Yeah.
So one more step before I want to get to the actual best practices is I think it's important to talk about what is a best practice. Because I think people have different expectations about what that is, different definitions around that. So I'm curious for you, Jocelyn, what does a best practice mean?
Yeah, actually, I love that question, Jen, because there is actually a lot of confusion around that idea, but it's rarely spoken about explicitly. So the way I think about best practices they are methodologies that have some amount of definition and that have been proven to work at scale in some kind of environment. Now, that all said, that doesn't mean that this particular best practice is going to work in your environment. So one of the things that I find really interesting is as humans, we're really challenged at identifying causality. So like as an example, the fact that Google serves free food, like turns out is not the core of Google's business or the processes of Google. But sometimes that is confused and like people are like, what if we just gave free food? Like then we would have top engineers and top products, right? It's like, turns out no. So there's really this element of a best practice should be something that is like, again, has a particular definition, like has a particular structure to it, has been proven to work at scale, and should be core to like the business, the team, the products, the actual functioning of the core business. But again, that doesn't mean I can just pull off the shelf whatever best practices and just be like, well, Amazon did it, so I'm sure it's good, or Google did it, so I'm sure it's great. That doesn't mean it's going to work well for you. So that's where the trickiness around best practices comes in.
Yeah, agree with you 100%, but it has to start with the mission and the values of that company, of that team, of you as a leader. And then once you get clear on that, these are the outcomes we provide. This is what we do. This is who we are as a company. This is who I am as a leader. Then you can take a look at, okay, this is what worked at Google. This is what worked at Amazon. And then you can kind of plug them in and make them aligned with, change them, tweak them to make it work for you. So I think that's an important caveat as we jump into what has worked at some of these at scale, for sure, for some of these big name tech companies.
Well, and I would say the only other component that also impacts like mission, vision, goals, like all of that super impact, the other is culture. So that's the part that almost can make something like organ rejection if done incorrectly. Like if you try to inject something, but the culture just doesn't quite work that way. So I think that's the other component that needs to be looked at. But absolutely, it all needs to be in alignment, as you said.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is capture the distinctions as we talk today, and have on these little sticky notes, hopefully you guys can see this.
Awesome.
I know I'm covering my face, so I won't do it like the whole time. So that I'll write them down. I have a couple of them already written down because we talked about this a little bit before. So that we can get, throughout when we're talking, what are these best practices? And then I'll share them all again at the end.
Totally.
But this first one is one that we've talked about is one leadership best practice, focus on the why, not the how. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and especially why this might be particularly tricky for folks who might have started out as an individual contributor, as a programmer, and now are making their way into management.
Definitely. So one of the things that I love, and actually this also like integrates with culture too, like whether it's an individual or if it's a whole culture that is rooted more in engineering. Whenever I deal with like heavily engineering teams, they quickly go to, well, how do we do it? Well, the database isn't configured in this way. So I'd have to like reroute the database, and, and like the primary keys would need to be redone or whatever, the structure, the schema needs to be recreated. And so they quickly go into like, okay, you gave me a problem. Now I'm going to figure out how to solve it. But often forget the question of, well, who is this for? Like, how big is that market? Have we actually talked to that customer? Do we know like that they actually need this thing? How do we know? Like, did we lead them to it? Did we say, hey, I worked really hard on this. Like, could you love me and say that you want this thing? And then they said yes. Or did it like come from organic conversation and real observation of customers and real looking at human behavior and seeing, yes, there's an unmet need, there's a problem, there's a friction point, and in fact, our thing is going to solve it. And the other thing I feel like, even once you identify that something's a problem, that you can solve it, which is huge right there. But the other thing that I think a lot of companies, like especially if they're modeling after Google, they may miss the fact that also we do in fact need to think about monetization. Like we do in fact need to be a functional business. So I might have a problem, you might solve it, but is it a big enough problem that I'm opening up my wallet, that I'm like, oh, I need to pay for this thing because I need it that much, versus, yeah, my life would be a little bit better if I could configure all my tabs to be purple all the time, but I don't know that I'm going to really spend like hard-earned money on the purple tab configurer.
That's a great example. And I'm wondering if you can come up, if you can think of other examples from because this is in thinking about product, right? And thinking about focusing on why are we building this product? Why are we building this software? And that's an important thing, an important focus to have, especially as the leader, whether it's a product team or an engineering team or any kind of team of peeps who's helping to build this product or this service as well, to have that customer focus, but really the why. Why at the end of the day are they spending their hard-earned money, even if it's just $10, even if it's more than that? Why are they doing it? So do you have examples, like from your life, or even like things that you may have purchased or worked on building that were like, there was a really strong why behind it?
Oh, yeah, really strong whys are like all over the place. I mean, it's so funny to me. One thing that I found really interesting when I went to get the latest iPhone, and I'm like, oh my God, this thing is the cost of laptops from, like from when I was, going to school. And I mean, even maybe now, I don't know. But anyway, I'm like, oh my God, this is so costly. This is so like ridiculous in a way. But then when I think about it, I'm like, wait, I spend my life on this thing. Like my whole business is run from this thing. I need to know what the latest apps are. I need to be connected with people. I need to be able to connect with people in just like uncountable ways, right? From like, because I'm running a business, right? I need to be able to like collect payment in all these different ways. I need to be able to message people in all these different ways. So there's so much of my life that is run through this device. And so on the one hand, you can look at it and be like, oh my gosh, this is above $1,000. Seriously, like, what is this thing? This is insane. And on the other hand, you're thinking, okay, this is my tether to the world. This is how I connect to the world. If that connection breaks, $1,000 now looks really cheap. Like it looks like no money at all. And I just need that to completely work. So I need to know that like whatever I'm using is reliable, is efficient, is the latest, like all of these things.
Yes, absolutely. I want to say, I love you, iPhone. I love you so much, right? Because it really is about that connection. Yes, troubleshooting and having all the apps on there. Like I just called my husband before, and while I was trying to figure out like, how do I get the video to work on Live? Like I'm talking to him and then I'm talking to you. And so it's certainly functional in that way that it's like allowing this to happen today. Otherwise I would have just thrown my hands up and say, forget it. I don't want to figure this out. Like it allows that level of connection, but also like the connection makes us feel human. Right. Totally. And that's if we don't connect with others, especially in our lives when we can be a little bit more kind of shut in and closed in and don't kind of go out there in the world anymore. And that's kind of the paradox of having all of this technology. Yeah. But if you embrace it and love it, that it can really kind of just create more love and happiness in your life.
And even when like breaking the boundary, and it's funny because like right now we're in the midst of winter, which in the Northeast is very like, am I ever going to leave this house again? It is so cold. But at the same time, when we actually venture out too, I don't think I could ever physically meet someone without this phone, because we're like at the last minute being like, oh, do you want to go to this cafe or this restaurant? And then being able to find it. Like it's awesome to be able to plug that into maps, have it just route me directly there, not have to think about right, left, which street, whatever. It's just like routing me. So with all the implications that has, which are obviously huge, at the end of the day, this is a fundamental device for just managing life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's a great example of why focusing on why is so important, is knowing the why behind what you're doing and what you're building. Can you think of other examples or other like tangents of this focus on why? So if we were to look at focus on why as a best practice, what are some of the other, I'm trying to think of the right word. Like if you were to draw a line from here's the big thing, like one of them is the product and know your customer. What other reasons is this so important from a leadership perspective?
Sure. I mean, it's funny because I often use focus on why as a shorthand for like, it's really why, and then it's what, and then it's how. And usually we approach it first from how, and then we're like, yeah, and I don't know, what was it again? Why are we doing it? Like, I don't know, stuff, whatever. I know how to do it though. And you're like, cool, but if no one cares, I mean, and this was the whole premise of like the lean startup and all of this movement is if you build something really technically involved, difficult, whatever, but no one uses it, like what was the point? So one example that I always think of on like when I avoided a bunch of work that I was like, why would we do this? So it's funny when I was first at Amazon, like somebody wanted to rebuild like a machine monitoring tool, except like the idea I think was more to just play with other technologies or something. And like at the end of the day, when we walk through it, I'm like, wait, how's it going to look different? How's it going to function differently? Like, what are the current problems with the tool? And when we looked at all those things, it's like, okay, it'll look only different because you like redid it, but not like be functionally so much better, be such a better UI. It was going to have all the same functionality and like and just I mean there was just no benefit, like I mean other than oh maybe use a new technology and like test it out. I mean, yes, you can absolutely do that kind of thing if the new technology is like, I don't know, there's big questions around it, or there's some, you're just like doing a proof of viability in terms of or feasibility in terms of like a technical question.
Sure.
But this really wouldn't have proven that either. Like it really just it wasn't going to like test the boundaries of what was technically feasible with this new, thing. And so there was just this question on every front because not everything is going to be customer facing. Like sometimes you're going to test out a new database because like long term you think it'll help the customer, but that help might be saved efficiency for your engineers. It might be like the ability to change things a little more easily, enabling features down the line, but you don't know what all of those features are. So not everything immediately is going to be customer facing, but there needs to be some clear value, whether it's internal, external, whatever it is, that when you say, and I often use, like, for example, the Amazon press release process, which I'm a huge fan of. And you could use it for internal or external projects. The idea is not that you like put this press release on TechCrunch and take marketing's role, but it's to write up a one pager of what you are intending to do in the most compelling way possible for your target customer or user, so that when they read it, they're like, wow, that's amazing. I really want you to do that. Because if you can't get down into one page, like why the thing you're about to do is so compelling, why are you doing it?
Yep, absolutely. And we tend to get so like excited by the new tools and the new shiny new things. Right. So if you're a programmer, it's the latest and greatest and whatever the programming is. For me, my level of geekery was about data analysis. So it was always what's the new and greatest data analysis tool and the new way of analyzing data. And like, okay, yeah. I'm going to use this new structural equation modeling with categorical variables and predicting and Bayesian whatever. Oh, this sounds so cool.
Right.
But why? Like, what's the purpose behind what you're doing?
Right.
And I think you bring up a great point, Jocelyn. And sometimes it's for internal testing, and it's like, okay, I want to test this new shiny new thing to see if it actually works. If that's right. The why, that's cool. That's good that you know why you're doing it. But if it's, oh, I think the customer's really going to love that I'm using this shiny new thing under the hood, they don't know what's under the hood. They don't see it. They experience it on the outside. So that's a great example.
I mean, and it could be like, oh, implementing this new technology is going to, make my performance better so that the latency is lower, so that the customer has a faster thing. Yes, that is where technology is often a very direct correlation. But again, it's very specific. It's, I want to convert to this technology so that latency is decreased, so that we rank higher in Google, so that people get their results faster, so that our bounce rate decreases, that the engagement is increased. There is still a specific end goal there.
Yep. And I challenge everyone, can you finish that so that? Can you fill in the blank? Play Mad Libs.
Yeah.
So that what? we're using this technology so that, and come up with at least 3 reasons. And if you can't, then why? Why are you doing it in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay, so moving on, the next best practice is grow your EQ.
Awesome. Yeah.
Grow your EQ. So first of all, what's EQ?
Yeah. So EQ is fundamentally emotional intelligence, which I'm sure many of you like know or have heard. I mean, it technically stands for emotional quotient, but fundamentally it's emotional intelligence. And it's interesting because I often talk to people about there's this emotional intelligence is fundamentally about dealing with people, right? IQ is like facts, figures, being able to manipulate physics, your brain, like being analytical, all of this. And EQ is very much the emotional realm. Like, so it's so funny because one of the things that I find often, especially with people who are more technical, like who are more engineering driven, and they're just like, I'm just so smart. So I have gone up the ranks because I made the best algorithms. I made the best, code. I did all these things like super well, which is amazing. It's so critical. It's so important. But there's an element of what got you here isn't going to get you there. So if you were the lone developer, the lone wolf in the corner who's like, haha, these algorithms are the best, and then you are moving into more of a leadership role, it turns out you being really smart doesn't necessarily motivate your team to like do the things that are needed, or doesn't even, I mean, the other thing I want to point out is doesn't even necessarily make you a good teacher of what you did. Like you might have done some amazing things. Your code might be unreadable. Like it might be, incomprehensible to everyone else. So there's a lot of change that needs to happen when you go from being an individual contributor to even a tech lead or a tech lead manager or, or a product manager, some role that deals with like coordinating people at a larger scale. So it doesn't mean that you can like just let go of your IQ and your technical expertise and all of this, but it does mean that now the game has changed, and as much as we don't want to admit this, like politics and bureaucracy are a thing, like moving large amounts of people requires very different skills. And that's where the EQ transition has to happen, or the EQ like buffing up and saying, okay, how do I make sure I understand what people are actually saying? How do I hear their concerns? And I think one of the things that I often find with someone who's really smart, it's like, how do I hear someone's concerns, think they're all invalid, and still work with this person to unearth what's really going on.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I see too happening, and I've done this, guilty of this for sure, is somebody comes to you with their problem and then you say, oh, I know how to fix it. Let's do this. But that's not going to work. Like most of the time, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to work. They're not going to hear you. And because they don't, just because you understand it and that you understand how to fix it and that you understand the consequences and have jumped 5 steps ahead, it doesn't mean that they have. So that's part of that EQ too, is that empathy for meeting that person where they are. And, okay, I hear you. I understand that. Let me, maybe even just asking a question sometimes. How do you think we should solve it? Like, I appreciate that you're having this problem. I've solved it before. They're like, oh, okay, can you tell me? No. I'm not going to tell you yet because just because I did it this way before doesn't mean it's going to work in your case. But I want to understand. Let's connect on a human level. Let's really have that heart to heart, right? That's the way that I think about it. Is that the IQ is like, it's about up here. It's your brain. You have a superpower, super brain. That's awesome. The super intellect. But let's also make sure that we lead from our heart as well, and remember to connect on that level. And to remember that it's not just about what we're thinking and what your team is thinking and who you're working with is thinking. It's also about what we're feeling as well.
Yeah, I think like what we're feeling. And the other thing that I always like come back to as well when, managing and leading people, and I feel like this gets overlooked a ton, is just what is everyone's individual motivation? Like you really need to understand what is it that drives this person who you're talking to? Is it that they want to get promoted? Is it that they love high quality and they're all about the quality of things? Is it that they want to go home every night at 5 p.m. because they have kids that they want to like put to bed? It's funny because I feel like that is often overlooked or just like not explicitly discussed. And yet, that's at the heart of so much of what drives us as human beings. So, if I came in because I had another argument with my spouse because I have a 2-hour commute every day and it's like killing our relationship, that is not going to be solved by like logically going through or even just like trying to connect, but it's like you're missing what drives me. You're missing what the whole foundation is.
Yep. So I'm going to add that one as another leadership best practice.
Yeah.
It's related to EQ, but I think it's separate enough. Understand their motivation. Who is they? It's the person that you're talking with. It's your whoever you're having that one-on-one with. It's your boss. It's whoever it is. Because if you can't do that, you're not gonna really connect with them.
So, definitely.
Yeah. So anything else to say about EQ? I mean, yes, I know that's the answer. But before we move on to anything else, is there anything else, Jocelyn, that you wanted that's on your mind, that's on your heart that you really want to just talk about right now?
I mean, I love that you asked that question. I mean, obviously, given our like backgrounds, we know like EQ is like just saying EQ is like scratching the surface of a mountain. It's just like, oh my gosh, this is so big. I will say, and this is something that like we can reiterate at the end and post. I have a leadership like micro course that's free that like I can share the link to, and it goes into even more of that like EQ, IQ and breaking it down. So things like using curiosity, like I think one of the things, I mean, even just the I know brain, the like, I already know, why don't you know? Like shifting the way that we approach things is huge. So I will share that link with you and with everyone. And that can be like another way to kind of dive in even deeper on that topic.
Absolutely. Yep. And I can absolutely share the link, put it below the video, share it in all the places, and we'll mention it at the end as well. But you actually just mentioned, I wonder if we could talk about another leadership best practice, which is beginner's mindset.
Absolutely.
Because I think something that gets in the way is that, oh, I already know. Yeah. Maybe I haven't led before, but I've seen people lead. I've been a member of teams, or I've been leading already for 10 years, for 15 years. I know this already.
Yeah.
That so get in the way.
Oh yeah. I mean, it does. Like I would say it always does eventually. So it's like, have you hit your eventually? Meaning if you like, you know, constantly, and I mean, and I want to say very explicitly, I completely have done that. Like I remember when I was in my early to mid 20s at Amazon and I was like, I should run this place. What's up with these people? You know, I was like, I know everything, whatever. So ridiculous. But I definitely had this like huge amount of hubris. And I was like, yeah, this is ridiculous. I could totally do this, you know, all of that. And it's funny. I think, you know, one of the healthiest things that I've found, like personally, as well as with my clients and my teams that I work with, the best leaders learn all the things they don't know as they go. Like it's basically you're learning, in fact, how big the world is. And then what you do is you find experts in the things that you don't know so that they can augment you. Because I mean, as smart as anyone is, like you literally can't know everything. You cannot be an expert in everything. But if you can clearly identify the areas that you don't know, that you're a total beginner, that you're not like an expert in, and further, if you can identify people who are and get them to help augment, whether it's via consulting, whether it's via hiring them, whether it's via using their service or product, whatever it is, it to augment the things you don't know. Now we're talking like an interesting spot. Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny because I'm actually in the midst of reading The Big Leap. I'm not sure if you've read it or heard about it. So The Big Leap is this really awesome book about this notion that like there's an upper limit that we tend to hit. So like when we get to a certain point in our life, like whether it's on love, success, or creativity, like there's an upper limit that like we've never necessarily gotten past, and we often like keep butting up. And if we go past, we often will like bring ourselves right back down. So there's like this interesting psychology that goes on where like we need to be able to expand our comfort zones, but need to be able to do it gradually. And even then there's still an upper limit. And in addition to this notion about like hitting this upper limit where, related to this concept, it would be you're always a beginner at something, or you're always like, even maybe I'm a beginner at this next level, but I'm a beginner there. I may have mastered these, but there's still something else ahead. The other thing that they talk about, so like in addition to the upper limit, is there's stuff in your like zone of ignorance, zone of competence, zone of excellence, and zone of genius. This notion that like there's stuff that, and I'm sure we all have friends where like some are amazing at physically doing things like, oh, I can install this, I can do that. And then other people are like, the jar doesn't open. I have no like idea as to how to open it now. Yeah. And it's like, and there's some level of like, yes, you can get tools, but like, you're never going to necessarily, and again, I mean, unless you like decide that you want to get amazing at this, you could just spend your whole life being like, yeah, that's not my deal. Like, that's not,
That's right.
I'm not good at this thing. And so rather than spend, in the book, actually, there's this example of this executive who charged like $1,000 an hour for his services. And he was, or it may have even been 10, like it was some like large, very large figure. And he had gotten this like $1,000 printer that he spent 13 hours trying to install. And then he like ended up just hiring a college kid who like got it done in an hour and paying the college kid like $100. And so the conclusion was something like, oh, so you basically spent $13,100 like trying to install this printer while you like weren't with your kids, you weren't working, you weren't like experiencing these other things. And so there's this element of, let me recognize there's a set of stuff that I'm a total genius at. So for that guy, the stuff that he's charging $1,000 an hour for, he's probably at least excellent, if not a complete genius at that stuff, where it's his jam, it's his bread and butter, it's his, zone where he's amazing. But the printer thing, it's like, look, that is zone of incompetence. Or even if you were competent, even if you eventually got it at hour 20, like, is it really worth that? So instead, get someone in either your zone of incompetence, competence, or even in the excellence realm. If you want to run like a really high scale business, you want to get people who are geniuses at the things that you need, where it's like, look, maybe I'm not a genius at, office management, but someone must be. So let me get them.
Yeah. Great. And that reminds me of another one. This is flowing so wonderfully. So network on purpose.
Yeah.
Would you agree that that's a leadership best practice?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because excuse me. I'm reluctant to call that just a leadership best practice.
Oh, sure.
Because I'm just like, wait, yes, you should do this. Like, it makes your life so much better. It just, it's funny. I had a client who was saying something about how all of her friends, she was like, not meeting the people I want to in New York. Like, they're all doing whatever, different things. Like, maybe they're home with their families or whatever it is. And it's like, I want to be with people who want to go out. Now, this is maybe in a more personal realm. I think in her case, it was a combination of like networking professionally and personally. But the idea is, cool, go to where your people are. Go to where they're hanging out. Like, if you want to be around a lot of entrepreneurs, go to entrepreneur events. Don't talk about how you don't know any. Go to those events. If you want exposure into technology, go to those events. I mean, whether it's a meetup or whether it's a professional event, or in New York, going to the Javits, there's all kinds of stuff going through there. I mean, go to the places where the people who do the things you want, or who think the things that you agree with, or who think things that you don't know about yet but sound intriguing. It's like, maybe you say, oh, I heard all this stuff about transcendental meditation. I want to like know what that's about. Cool. Go to a thing, meet the people, see if it's your jam. You know, another person might say, like for me, I do a lot of improv in the city because, you know, I was like really interested in improv. I think it's an amazing thing for really helping you be on your toes and on your feet, and like someone throws whatever at you and you're just like, yeah, I got this, like I could do this. So it's great for all of that, and it's just a lot of fun. But at some point, if you're into improv or stand-up or whatever it is, just go try it out, see what people are doing.
Love it. And I'm going to test your improv skills right now,
No.
because I'd love to hear what are other leadership best practices that you learned at Amazon and Google that you find yourself giving that advice to clients over and over again?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because like one thing that was coming to mind as I was thinking about this ahead of time too is I want to mention like one of the things that Google uses, and it's kind of in between like a tool and a best practice, is the objectives and key results framework, or OKRs.
Yep.
So that's like a great framework for goal setting. I will say that, so there's this idea of you have this objective, it's this super ambitious goal. And it's usually very ambitious. And then you have key results, which are SMART goals that you're specifically going to do. And you also have like clear metrics of, you know, I want it to be plus 30%, plus 300%, like whatever it is on the thing that you're aiming for. So there's just like very clear criteria on when have I achieved this ambitious goal. Now, I will say it's a very powerful framework, but it needs to be adopted and adapted carefully to different corporate environments. Because part of the thing that Google was especially tapping into, and in fact, Google didn't even originate it. I think it was originally from, I believe it's Intel. It's either IBM or Intel. And I think it was one of those two, but it originated there, and then Google popularized the idea. But the thing about OKRs is that it presses on the boundaries of what is possible. So the idea of like approaching something that is ambitious and super ambitious, that's really trying to get people into a different mindset. Because for example, if I aim to make a system 5% more like faster, then I'm going to approach things very tiny, moderate changes. But if I say this system needs to be 30% faster or twice as fast, like substantially 10 times as efficient, whatever it is, sure, now I have to think about things in a totally different way. So now I'm like, oh, little tweaks are not going to get me there. Where's the majority of latency being spent? How do I completely remove that out of the system? And I think one of the best examples of this is actually in an interesting realm, not at all in tech, and it wasn't exactly an OKR, but in a sense, it kind of was. When JFK said we were going to the moon, he was like, we're going to the moon. It's by this date. And at the time, anyone who's watching that, especially the folks like at NASA, like at the places who were going to have to make this thing a reality, they're watching this and they're like, dude, I don't even know what you're talking about. We don't have any of that stuff. Like, I mean, I basically know where it is, but I have no idea how to get there. We don't have any of the things we need. And, but this amazing human achievement, I mean, it's like humanity shifted at that point. And over the next like decade, I mean, not only did it happen, but like the innovations that needed to happen, they weren't in anyone's head until like that marching order got put out there. And then they had to think about everything differently because this super ambitious goal got stated to the world by the president. So you're like, I don't know, I guess I got to think of something.
We got to do it. We got to make it happen.
Yeah.
Cool. So I got two of them out of there. They're related, but one may resonate more than with others. So adopt the OKR framework, right? So it's not just about the OKR framework, it's adopting it and adapting it for your team, for your organization. But then kind of what comes out of that is originally I wrote, imagine what is possible. But then the JFK reminded me, you got to declare it as well. Imagine and declare what is possible, and say it out loud, and make it something that you remind yourself and you remind your team of every single day, even if it seems ridiculous, like, going to Saturn or something like that. I don't know, or whatever that is.
We're currently on Mars. Get it? No, but anyway.
Right, exactly. Cool. Awesome. So we have a couple of more minutes, Jocelyn. So if there's another one that you wanted to share, or we can start to wrap up.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the thing that I want to really mention is that there are so many principles. There are so many best practices. You can sometimes get overwhelmed in all of that. So so you definitely want to understand Amazon, Google, all of this, right? They're so important. And that's the kind of thing that I often come in and work with either individual leaders or teams on really understanding what's going on in their environment, and then how do we take these best practices. But I do want to emphasize, it's funny, I remember at one point I was working with a client where they kept wanting to hear case studies, because case studies are always illustrative of best practices and of things going really well. And I said to them at a certain point, I said, look, you love the case studies. You want to hear more case studies. Of course you do, because case studies are great. You sit back, you read them, you say, doesn't that look pretty? It looks so pretty. It looks so nice. Ponies and unicorns live there. Like, that's amazing. But at the end of the day, you literally, the impact of this stuff only comes into play when you take one of these things and you figure out, does this apply for my environment? Is it going to solve one of the current problems or challenges that I have right now? And then how do I literally, boots on the ground, start taking it and adapting it for what I am doing? Because without that, I could list out a million more best practices. We could tell all the stories and everyone would feel like, wow, that's real. Oh, can you believe they did that? Oh, wow, that's really great. That worked really well. Who cares if you're not using it? So knowledge is not meaningful unless you are living it, unless you are using it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to decide, you got to think through exactly what you were thinking through. Is this going to work here? And you go through, and then you decide, and then you take action, and you go and you do it. So that's Absolutely. A great way to wrap them all up. I'm just going to go through them all really quickly. So Focus on why, not how.
Mm-hmm.
Grow your EQ.
Yeah.
Understand their motivation.
Right, which can apply to customers too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have a beginner's mindset.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we have here? Network on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not just for leadership, it's for life.
Yeah.
And the 2 OKR ones, the more heady, intellectual, adopt the OKR framework. And then the more inspiring, imagine and declare what is possible. And then last but not least, in order to reach what is possible, we need to decide and take action.
Right. So in a sense, we already gave you too many. We already gave you too many things. So really, with all of that, if one of them you already feel like I already nailed that, cool, bag it, call it good for now. But really, I would say for anyone watching this, what is literally the one that you think where you are right now, either as an individual, as a leader, for your team, whatever it is, what is the one best practice, the one idea that you look at and you're like, we're not doing any of that shit and we really should? The one thing that you're like, wow, if we did X, fill in the blank, if we adapted and adopted the OKR framework, if we networked on purpose, if we, whatever the case is, if we decided and declared this big goal and approached things in that way, one principle, one best practice, and say, what action am I going to take in the next 7 days and even tomorrow? I want to do something tomorrow. I want to do something this week. I want to do something in the next 2 weeks. What are the set of concrete things that I'm going to do to implement, explore? And, and I want to put out the offer. Like I mentioned, we will share the link to the leadership micro course. But also, if anyone listening to this, if you want to speak individually, whether it's about you or about your team, you can reach out to me. You can write me at Jocelyn at jocelynmariemiller.com. You can just go to jocelynmariemiller.com and schedule an appointment there. Whatever it is you need. But if you're listening to this and you're like, we don't do any of these things and I don't know where to start and I'm not even sure what to do, or I do know what to do, but I've known, like, knowing what I'm supposed to do versus doing what I'm supposed to do is a very different thing. And, I really need some help, or I need to make that happen in 2019. So how am I going to do that? Please feel free to reach out.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for spending some time today. This was great. I know that people are going to find this valuable. Apologies for the technical mix-ups in the beginning. We know how to do it now. We will conquer Be Live. We will know how to do it next time. So thank you so much for spending time today. I hope that we can talk again real soon about some of these other topics and dive even deeper.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jen. This has been super fun and I just love what you're doing. And thank you for having me as a guest here. It's just as fun as the podcast was.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Sending my love your way as well. So thank you so much. We're going to sign off for now, folks. So bye for now.
Bye for now. Bye.